I am happy to be here. I see some friends like JF that I haven't seen in way too long, and Jay, and I, of course, see a whole bunch of new people who are friends. So let me start by putting into the chat. I try to be quite easily found, and I will connect with you on LinkedIn if you want to connect with LinkedIn. If you want to do various other things, I see Lab Zero represented, and of course you have some brilliant Agilists at Lab Zero. I saw Chris Sims is coming. Chris Sims is a great friend and another brilliant Agilist, so it's really quite enjoyable to be here. I would encourage everyone to feel comfortable that you can ask me anything. I'll go through my deck, but literally, you can ask me anything. You're not gonna worry me or concern me or whatever. And I'm not going to be crusty and mean and old or something like that. But I have been doing this thing called software for quite a while, and I have been doing Agile for a while. I would add one final thing to this conversation. While I am a consultant, I remain a practicing Agilist. So I still write stories, I still build roadmaps, I still price and license things. And so I never underestimate how hard this is and how much we work to try and create something great. With that, I am very excited to introduce the latest contribution to what I hope is the contribution to the Agile community, and that's helping us think about value in a slightly different way and helping us evolve software profit stream, value streams into profit streams. Now, the good news is, while Alana was introducing everyone, I learned that I have more time than I expected. So I've whipped up a Miro board and we'll have additional fun. So I managed to whip up an activity that we can do together, which I'm somewhat known for doing interactive things. But on this one, I'd like to get started with software profit streams. I'm going to go through a deck, take some questions, go through a second deck that goes into more detail in a given area, and then have an activity that we can do together to try and bring this to light. Would that work for everyone? And will you all promise to act like Jay and just interrupt me when I need to be interrupted? Rob is like, yeah. Okay, well, I am so happy to be here. So again, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to hit play. And are we looking good so far? Thumbs up? Okay, let's do it. So I'm going to go through a little bit of an introduction about my background, a couple of highlights, and then I want to talk about value streams and profit streams. So let's start. Oh, I skipped myself because Elena did everything else. Let's start with value streams. So when you start thinking about value streams, and in the Agile community, value streams are kind of hot and cool, right? In the 1910s, we started to get industrial manufacturing. Taiichi Ono talked about the Toyota production system. Womack and Jones started to put some real elements to this. We've got Karen and Smith and her work in value stream mapping. I know a couple of people on this call are skilled at value stream mapping. So we have a lot of value stream mapping in the Agile community. And so we have this notion of like, well, what's a value stream? Well, at its simplest form, it's just a sequence of activities that an organization undertakes to produce, deliver, and as needed, maintain or extend a product or service. And so you can think of raw material coming in and making a widget. And the interesting thing is value streams are, of course, are everywhere. They define everything from buying milk to a new couch, upgrading your software, to recycling your old phone. So there's these value streams that just live everywhere. And if you know SAFe, you know that value streams are very prominent in SAFe. And SAFE focuses on two kinds of value streams: operational value streams and development value streams. SAFE 6.0, which was recently launched last week, it extends us into some other things, but we look at operational value streams, and this is really how a customer interacts with the enterprise. And typically in SAFE, it's operational value streams are used to model value as given to a customer, whereas development value streams are modeling internal value, the internal systems. And so in our world, we think of operational value streams as giving us access to revenue, and development value streams as giving us access to costs. So if I were to go over to SAFE and I were to show you some of the pictures from SAFE, you'd see like servicing a loan, and people go through the steps in servicing a loan, and there's internal bank systems like the fraud management system or other systems in SAFE that are associated with the management of the value streams. Now, Beyonce said, put a ring on it. And I'm going to say, put a number on it. Because if I don't know what my development value streams costs are, and I don't know my operational value streams revenue, I can't make choices that actually drive profit within my business. Now, let's look at some distinctions between the operational and development value streams. Right, in the operational value stream of getting a fancy car, the kind that JF drives every day, or Ed Cray. I mean, Ed Cray joined in. He's probably coming back from his latest foray into high-speed automotive mechanics. But nonetheless, we have operational and development value streams, right? The fulfillment of the order or the process to complete a routine maintenance. But in the development side, we might have a powertrain that's being built, or for us software people, we might be looking at the Porsche financial services solution, which is probably an internally built solution that helps them manage the funds and flows. Now, there's a lot of virtues to value streams, right? We can move on, we can change the focus on delivering a result of providing value. When I do value stream mapping, we identified bottlenecks and inefficiencies. We can look at specific steps to improve or remove. And one of the things that I like to point out is that innovation often lives at the edge of value streams. The triggering condition that motivates us to do something, all the way to the final part of that value stream where you're receiving the result. Often the edges of the value stream are where you find innovation. So by removing, changing, looking at shrinking or expanding the value stream, that's pretty important. And of course, value streams promote customer centricity and design thinking, which is part of all of the things that we want to build. However, value streams can be less valuable because many times I've seen organizations fail to actually quantify the value. And if you can't quantify the value, you don't know what to charge. So they fail to charge customers for the value provided. Last week, I was in New York City working with a startup, and they had identified a module to add to their platform. And they started the conversation by saying of what to charge customers, going, oh, well, that's going to take a dev team. We've got one dev team. It's going to take them about 4 months to build the module. That's going to cost us about $80,000, $90,000. So I guess we should charge. And I'm like, hey, time out. That's cost plus pricing. You're basing what you're going to charge your customers on what it costs you. Let's take a step back and let's figure out what the actual value is to the customer. And we did a back of the envelope value analysis, and we'll come to that in a moment. And we found that the value that the customer would be receiving was about 4 times what they would be charging. Now, are you going to get all of the value? No, there's always negotiation and some things like that. But the starting condition of a price based on cost plus versus a price determined by understanding the value you're providing is usually a vastly different set of prices. More importantly, and I'm going to take a dig at the no estimates crowd because I think they're fun to play with. I want a no estimate person to hire me to remodel their home, and I'll no estimate myself into retirement. Businesses can't run on no estimates. Businesses have to say, like, look, I'm willing to invest so much because I need this kind of a return. And if I can't gauge the return by understanding the value I'm providing, I don't know what my limit is on investing. And this is very important. Now, if I don't do those things, well, then I can't have a repeated pattern of success. And one of the great new books that's out there is Build by Tony Fadell. If you haven't gotten it, you should. If it's on your reading list, great. If you've already read it, fantastic. But Tony points out that even a massively successful product like the iPod took a few generations to be successful, but they knew it would be eventually successful because the unit economics were profitable. So I can't build a sustainable business. I can't make those investments over time if my unit economics or my unit sales aren't in themselves profitable. And that requires me moving beyond this ill-defined concept of I'm providing value to I am quantifying the value I'm providing so I know what I can charge, and I know what I can charge is going to create a sustainable profit for my company. So let's look at software profit streams. Just as Mother Nature relies on the energy from the sun to sustain life on Earth, every business must have a profit to be sustainable. When you talk to people like, oh, Mother Nature's fine, we should leave it alone. I'm like, okay, we can leave it alone, but it can't be left alone. If you take away the sun, we all die. So a business is like that. We have to have that revenue coming in. Now, this profit drives sustainability because if I have the money coming in, I can, in fact, evolve my solution, change it, and I can invest to meet my customers' needs over time. So one of the most important tenets that we forget is that a business model and a price is a system. A price is not a number. It's a system, and it's part of a business model. More importantly, if we talk about our solution evolving over time, then the price has to evolve over time. Meaning, Agilists are like, oh, I release, Luke, you don't understand. I release multiple times a month, and I'm providing all this great value to my customers every release. Great. Are you going to charge more for it? When is the value you're putting in worthy of raising your prices? Because you've provided more value. So it's a system, which means we have to use systems thinking to make and remake a system of interdependent choices. This is a pen. When I sell this pen, you own it. You don't own software, you license it. And therefore, it starts from a very radically different foundation of interrelated choices. Let me illustrate this. Let's talk about this systems thinking. I've got a customer and I'm in the B2B space. So I want to license our software on an annual basis. Pretty common, yeah? And let's even say it's hosted. It's a hosted enterprise platform. Okay, well, that means I need a license agreement, and I need to capture the term of that license in my license agreement. Somewhere along the line, someone signed a piece of paper that said, this is a 1-year term or this is a 2-year term. Now, the architecture has to enforce those terms, right? Because somewhere along the line, that term is going to be over. And now you get into a whole set of questions that the technical team is going to have of the product team. If my friend Jay were the product manager, and he's done that role successfully many times, and I'm the engineer, I'm going to ask Jay, hey, Jay, what happens when the license agreement is done? Do I disallow users? Do I slow down the system? Do I delete the data? Oh, tell me what you want, man. Like, I need to know. Now, Jay is smart enough to know, like, he's got a global company, which means he's got things like GDPR. So he's got to deal with telling me, okay, in this jurisdiction that we're operating in, you're going to do this thing here with the license, because GDPR says you have to delete the data and you have to delete through backups. So my technical team has to now understand what we mean between the interaction between the technical architecture and the compliance. which means I'm going to go all the way back to the customer and say, hey, by the way, if you don't renew, I'm going to delete your data. I'll give you an export because that's the law in Europe. But if you want us to retain your data, you're going to have to pay. And this system is very dynamic and it's evolving all the time. So what we think of is that profit streams, because they have this system approach, are the necessary evolution of the value stream. It means what I said earlier, they have to quantify the economic value. They have to be sold through pricing and licensing choices that ensure the revenue is greater than the costs, but not just once, repeatedly over time. When you look at sustainability, because we are very much focused on sustainability, we have to kind of boil down, what do you mean by sustainability? Well, we think of three kinds of sustainability. We think of the sustainability of the solution. We think of the sustainability of the economics to serve the company and serve the market and serve the necessary changes in the solution. And we think about the relationship. Most of the time, we don't want to sell something once to a customer. We want to have a relationship that lasts for years and years. And I sometimes say this to people, like, imagine your Apple. How many iPhones do they want to sell you? One? Or do they want to sell you a generation of iPhones? How many Galaxy phones does Samsung want to sell you? One? Or do they want to sell you a generation? Now, this isn't new. When we started selling cars, General Motors was the car company that assembled a collection of car brands that way back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, you'd start with a Chevy, and then you'd graduate to a Buick, and then you'd go to an Oldsmobile, and then you'd get the Cadillac. So this notion of relationship sustainability is a very old concept in commerce. And of course, software just accelerates the pace at which that happens, right? We talk in generations that are much faster, but they still happen. You buy a BMW 3 when you're young and you want some fun. You buy a BMW 5 when you got that big promotion and you now have a couple of kids. You buy the BMW 7 when you want to go cruising to the wineries in Napa. Like, it's the same story. Okay, how do we keep going? Well, we capture all of this in a canvas, because canvases are very useful in helping us understand how we can manage these concepts of sustainability. So what we're looking at is we're looking at a particular set of nodes in this complex system. We're organizing them in a sensible way, and then we're putting them compactly into a canvas so I can help communicate and make decisions efficiently. So there's three areas in the design of our canvas. There's solution sustainability. How am I going to deliver customer value over time? There's the economic sustainability, which is the actual money and the numbers. And then there's the relationship sustainability, in licenses, out licenses, in compliance. How am I managing those license agreements? That's the horizontal construction of the canvas. There's also a couple of vertical constructions of the canvas. This is a snapshot of the book, and I'll cover the book in a minute. But what you can see here is the way this looks is that there is a vertical line here for the customer, and there's a vertical line here for the solution. There's a single box on compliance because it's such a special beast. And then there's monetization, and the monetization elements are this kind of foundation element that says, is my pricing model aligning with my technology in license? And is my technology in license aligning with my out license? And if you don't think that is important, I don't know if anyone remembers in the Web3 world, a few years ago, people were building smart contract companies on top of Ethereum. And they're like, man, Ethereum's awesome. Transaction fees are less than a penny. And then Ethereum blew up. And because they were doing proof of work, transactions in Ethereum were costing $50, $60, $80 for contracts that were very complex. Now, imagine you built an economic model and you pitched it to an investor, and you said, my economic model is based on transactions that cost a fraction of a penny. And you had to go back to the investor and say, oh, my technology in license that I built my solution on now cost me $50 a transaction. This is why these solution choices matter, because all of our solutions are built on these complex interrelationships. So let's see where we go with this. Let's talk about what the profit stream canvas. This is what it looks like. You can download it from profitstreams.com. And of course, there's a book that goes behind the canvas, and I'll talk about the book in a bit. But let's talk about, before we talk about the book, let's talk about quantifying value in the customer block. And so there's a couple of canvas blocks that I'm going to talk about specifically in this overview, and then we'll dig into it. The first is we have to define value, and we define value as the benefits a customer receives less the price that they pay. So there's this really important value equation that simply says that value is greater than price. But one of the things that we have to know is that to determine benefit, we have to actually do a benefit analysis, which is what dimensions of our solution provide benefit to the customer, and how do I quantify it? Now, one of the things that happens in technology is that we start with tangible benefits. And this is often in the hardware world, this is like speeds and feeds. You can buy a faster router, you can buy a faster car, you can buy a faster processor, you can buy a PC with more memory. And these things really drive tangible benefits. The problem is that most of the economic value of large companies is actually associated with intangible benefits, brand, goodwill, and other elements. And so one of the things that we've done in the book is we've really tried to say you have to have a balance between tangible and intangible benefits. So yeah, my Apple Watch provides a tangible benefit, but it also provides me with a pretty cool intangible benefit. It's a luxury brand. It's pretty cool. And I can look at those intangible benefits and help me make better choices about pricing and licensing. I was working with a startup that was working on a product that's attacking a large company here in the Bay Area in the enterprise software space. And they said, Luke, we can't charge as much as this large company because our functional or our tangible benefits aren't as good. And I said, well, okay, great, but tell me why customers buy from you. And the response from the CEO was, oh, well, we're a startup, and they know that we're more responsive than that other company. They know that we're going to listen to them and make changes to our software based on what they're telling us. They know that our early customers are really important to us. I'm like, great, you have to charge for it. Oh, we can charge for that? I'm like, yes, because they are valuing the fact that they're working with a small company, and therefore you can charge for that. And so we started to build a better economic model for that company because they could actually look at their intangible benefits. Now, one of the things that we don't take into account is that benefits themselves are not isolated. Benefits are a system. And you're going to see this as a recurring theme in software profit streams, is looking at systems thinking. I did a lot of work in the trucking industry. And if you were to create a trucking solution that allowed you to reduce your maintenance cost, but to reduce the maintenance cost that you spent with a truck, you also reduced driver safety and you reduced driver satisfaction, then you're not going to have a system of value that is working for your customer. Because a trucking executive isn't going to accept that drivers could get hurt or be in accidents to increase maintenance. And especially in the B2B space, we're mapping these relationships because we cannot understand, or we cannot allow people to drive value in a part of the system below a certain threshold or have a negative effect on other parts of the system. Now, we paper over that. People say, oh, it's too hard to use, or it's too hard to use. Well, that might be that I created some feature, but it was so hard to use, so my relationship in the value equation was off, and I often have to fix that. The next thing I want to talk about is imagine, and I'm picking off a couple of the box of the canvas, but this is part of the middle part of the canvas. It's part of monetization. Once I have a solution and I have a customer, I have to trade the solution for money. Are you with me? I have to have a value exchange. Now, when I'm buying a pen, there's really only one kind of value exchange. I give you money, you give me pen. That's the basic. Are you with me? I give you money, you give me pen. Turns out that there's more than one value exchange with software. And I think of these as the atomic letters of the business model alphabet for software. So if you want to know how to tell the right story, or you want to write at all, you have to know the letters of English or the language you're using so that you can form the words and the sentences in the story. So think of what I'm about to show you as the atomics, the letters of the business model alphabet that get associated with software. And you're all tingly with excitement, I can tell. So here we go. Oh, wait. I wanted to skip this part and I wanted to go right here. Sorry, I was doing last minute slides as we all do because of the thing. But here we go. There's 7 value exchange models for software enabled solutions. And I'm going to go through 3 of them or 2 of them now, and then we'll take a break and I'll go through the rest. Time-based access, transaction, data, service, meter, performance, and hardware. So I'm going to give you all of those 7, but I'm going to give you 2 right now. Time-based access is where the producer grants the customer the right to use the solution for a defined period of time. So you can think of your operating system, you can think of many subscription services, which are time-based access. And one of the characteristics of time-based access that's really important is that no one requires you to use the software in order to transfer money. Meaning, I could buy Disney Plus and not use it. Disney would be fine. But at the end of the term, my access goes away. We often confuse subscription billing with time-based access, but subscription billing is just a convenience for your payment process. What you really want to look at is what causes money to transfer between parties. And this will get easier once I go through a few of them, because all of these are things that you're familiar with. We're just pointing out what they actually are at the most fundamental level. The next one is a transaction. A transaction is where both the producer and the customer agree to a clear and measurable unit of work that defines the value exchange. So the easiest thing to think about transactions are financial transactions. Stripe will sign a contract with you that includes time, but the dominant form of causing money to trade hands is a transaction. I don't pay Stripe unless someone does a checkout. Google is a transaction model because I don't pay Google unless someone does what? Click on the ad. That's what causes the Google transaction. Now, what's interesting about transactions is in our definition, notice that the value of the transaction is usually not the transaction, it's usually an attribute of the transaction. So in Google, the transaction of clicking on an ad is the same for every transaction. The value of the transaction is an attribute of the transaction based on other parameters. So many times the transaction's economic structure is based on these other parameters. Okay, we're doing great on time. So I have a few more that I'll cover, but I want to talk about one more block to give you a sense of what's in the canvas. The profit stream pricing model uses systems thinking to look at pricing itself. And this is a huge problem in our industry because we think of pricing as a number. Well, in reality, pricing starts with strategy. What is your strategy? Is it a premium strategy? Is it a penetration strategy? Is it a lost leader strategy? Is it a skimming strategy? There's about 10 strategies that we go through. Then we look at the structure. once I understand the strategy, I have to understand the actual structure. What am I charging against? That's usually aligned with your value exchange model. And then I add the specifics. How much am I going to charge? So if my strategy is premium and my structure is per user, then my specifics is going to tell me exactly what that number is. Is it $99 a user a year? Is it $999 a user per year? These are all going to flow through. Finally, we look at policies, and we specifically focus on discounts and discounting policies, because most people don't understand the distinction between a fence, which is applied to a group of customers, and a discount, which is applied to a specific transaction. And we find that companies often lose too much money because they're giving away too many discounts or too many things for free, if you will. So this is the entire canvas put together. There's a book coming. It's going to come April 4th. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but I have a moment to do it because this is kind of fun. When I was writing this book, I made a challenge to myself. The challenge, I'll stop sharing for a second. The challenge that I made to myself was to write literally the most beautiful book that has ever been written on pricing and licensing. I'll say it again, beautiful. So I thought the way to do that was I would write the book by hand, every page with my colleague. So take a look at this page for example. This is a page in the book about road mapping, and this is a page about in road mapping how to identify market windows. And then we hired a full-time graphic artist, and Fede Gonzalez was amazing, and the pictures I just showed you ended up looking like that. So we've got this amazing book where we have this absolutely beautiful approach. And if you just look at the contact sheet, you can see that things like, you might know me from pruning the product tree. You can start to see a condensation. When you get into the actual application of these thoughts, right? When am I applying value analysis, and how do I do it, and what segments am I looking at, and such things, you eventually get to the application section of the book. And I'll scroll down a little bit. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. And you start to realize that there's really two primary applications of the canvas in new solution development and solution lifecycle management. And then in new solution development, well, where are you? Are you a startup creating your first solution? Are you an established company creating a new solution within a portfolio? Are you creating an established company replacing an old solution with a software-enabled solution? Or are you doing a spin-out or a carve-out? These are all different approaches and techniques that we need to cover. And so we talk about how to use the canvas. And what I found in writing the book was because I was writing it by hand, I wrote fewer words. Because you know how big your pink pearl is when you start? This is how much I have left of my eraser. So by writing it by hand, we wrote fewer words, and by looking for ways to cover what we wanted to cover with pictures, we were able to create a different experience for you, the consumers of the book, and in a way that we hope makes it much more accessible and much more easy to apply. So at this point, I'm going to pause for a second, and then I was going to go, since we had some time, I was going to go into a deeper dive on value exchange models, and then do a breakout, a set of breakouts, because someone said, "Hey, Luke, do breakouts," so we'll do breakouts. What would you like to ask at this point, or what would you like to throw in the chat?
So subscriptions, are all subscriptions then considered time-based? The word always throws us off, but subscription is just how you accomplish it. It is a time-based value exchange.
subscriptions are a weird thing because let me give you an example of a different
A
value
data
exchange model.
subscription. Yeah.
Let me give you a different example of a value exchange model. And I'll talk where subscription would also apply. Meters are common, especially when what we're metering is below human cognition or beyond our ability to really make sense of it. So for example, the National Computer Lab in San Diego, the San Diego National Computer Lab, they charge by API access, but they're selling teraflops. So how much supercomputer teraflops do you need, right? Or IBM sells access to the Watson API through tiny fractions of pennies. So those are so small, I'm going to meter them. Or like usertesting.com, right? They sell metered access. And for everyone, I want you to be aware of, and I'll slow down because I know I often talk too fast when I get excited. And if you know me, I get excited about everything. But the when you are dealing with any software mechanism, you have a license, and that license governs your use over time. What I'm trying to say is that there's a difference between a license that governs your use of something in time and using time as the mechanism to motivate the exchange of value. Are you with me on the difference? So far, so good?
What's the example?
What would be a good example? Of something that is not associated with time-based access, but comes with a license for time. So when you go to a conference, pardon?
Dropbox.
Kind of. Dropbox is absolutely. Actually, I'll go with Dropbox. Dropbox, you have a license. It's a perpetual license to your data, but the way that you pay for it is based on a meter where there's a certain amount that's available for free. So they use a freemium pricing strategy, right? There's a service that you can get for free for as long as you want. And what they're motivating you to do is dump more content in there. So I'm metering the content. Are you with me?
Yeah, so it's transaction based. No, it's metered. It's metered one. It's not a okay.
Now, another thing, and I've got a fun activity for everyone on this. Another thing is another way to look at this is in the B2B space and a little bit in the B2C space, you can have a performance-based model. And I'll give you an example. There's a company called ServiceSource that got acquired by SAP, where ServiceSource would automate renewing subscriptions, but they would charge based on how many subscriptions they got to renew. So they would say, give us your subscriptions. We won't charge you anything if we can't renew. If we renew, we get 15% of what we renew. So you're using their software over time, right? So there's always a license, but the actual exchange of value is based on performance. i2, if you remember i2, the parts manufacturing company and the parts manufacturing management software, i2 used to do a performance mechanism also. Okay, hold on this. Any other questions on what I've covered thus far? BIPs, yeah, BIPs.
So in your canvas, the solution and economic part, they overlap in the monetization area, right?
Yes.
Tell more about that.
Well, when I hit monetization, I'm really thinking of the following factors. I have let me go back to the canvas, and I'll talk about what's in monetization and why the canvas is constructed in the way it is. Let me get the canvas picture. Let me turn on slideshow, go back to sharing screen. And if I go here, so when I think about the monetization part of the canvas. What I'm looking at here is, well, we've talked about value exchange. I have to know, like, am I doing per user? Am I doing per BIP, right? What is the exchange of value? Then I'm going to look at pricing. How much am I going to charge for that exchange of value? And that's my strategy, structure, specifics, and policies. And you can think of this part of the canvas as doing one transaction. I sold you access to Disney Plus for 1 month, but that's not interesting to business. What businesses want is they want repeated transactions. And I didn't cover this in the deck, but that's what we call the profit engine. The profit engine are the choices you make to create repeated or larger transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of these require a in-license from my technology providers and a license between me and my customer. So that's why all of these things in the reddish color are part of my monetization. And we go through this, of course, in great detail in the book, but that's why these are the elements that are associated with monetization. And the reason this monetization is important is in modern software applications, you might have 10, 12, 15 solution in licenses. If you're doing the simplest web startup as a hosted cloud, you've got Amazon for your hosting or Azure. You've got SendGrid to send out your emails. You've got MailChimp to automate your email listings. You've got GitHub to manage your code and other, like you've got all of these things that go into your solution licenses. So this is where that monetization comes in, because I might have to pass through part of the costs for my providers, and I have to make sure that these all line up.
And so the sustainability of your solution is also I guess the proper monetization create the sustainability of your solution.
Correct. And that's going to change over time, because as you release your product and you go from your new product development to your solution lifecycle, the pricing policies that you're using in this phase and the pricing strategies are not appropriate for this phase, and certainly not appropriate for when you're nearing the end of your life, because you may have in fact added the next version of your offering. So now you have to kind of start making decisions of, let's say I'm doing a video game franchise like Witcher, and I only know Witcher because one of my sons loves Witcher and he plays the Witcher franchise. So Witcher 1 came out, Witcher 2 came out. Well, do I lower the price of Witcher 1 or do I maintain them? And how long can I maintain them? Well, what happens when Witcher 3 comes out and Witcher 4 comes out? Am I expanding my market, or am I lowering my price because I've got slightly different value? These are the kinds of questions that I think the Agile community is not addressing, which is why I wrote another book. Because we have to move from value into understanding what's happening. And I'll give you one more thing that I think is really important, and then we'll do our activity. For software companies who get it, like the Bay Area, like we get all this, like we're the experts at this, like Salesforce and Oracle, and I mean, like we get all this. But we know what's happening is software is eating the world. I love telling this story. My wife is a really great cook, and we got 4 kids, and she's cooked for years and years. Well, after 18 years of kids, our stove broke down. We had it fixed, it broke down again, and finally she said to me, look, I'd really like a nice stove. And I was doing better, and I said, okay, what do you want? I'd really like a Wolf stove. Now, if anyone knows brands, Wolf is a very high-end brand, right? So I'm like, great. After 18 years married to this schmuck, you got a stove. I kid you not, people, the stove comes with an app, and I can turn it on and turn it off from my office. Now, I don't know why I can't get my lazy tush off the chair to go turn on my stove when it's just one room away. But think about that in your mind. Like, really think about this. I don't think that Wolf could build an internet-enabled stove for less than $1 million. I mean, seriously, right? They had to add new hardware. They had to have IoT. The hardware has to be probably pretty decent hardware because it's a stove. It's got to be insulated and it's going to get hot. They have a phone app, which means that you got to support Android and iOS. And we know that pricing is a system. All of us know this. We know that the data flowing through the air, who owns the data? Did they do it according to CCPA compliance? Is it GDPR compliant? I'm sure someone at Wolf Stove did this, right? Right, it's a very costly pocket dial. I love it, Chris. I love you for saying that. But are you with me on what's happening? The chair you're sitting in is going to be software enabled, and it's going to give you biofeedback, and then you're going to have a choice. Do I send that to my doctor or my chiropractor? This is what's happening as software is eating the world. And we understand these implications. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that, and I've said this in the Agile community for a long time, the least agile part of your architecture is your business model. Because once I get really good at transaction, I'm going to get really bad at time-based access. Once I get really good at time-based access, I'm going to get really bad at other forms of value exchange, because it's not just my architecture, it's my data models, my subscription services, my interactions, my notifications. The least agile part of your business is the value exchange model, which is why it's important to understand it, because everything else hangs off of it. And it's really critical.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Oh, please. Yeah, absolutely.
Why call that its own thing? You know, in some ways, it's your business. Your business model is your business. And in order to change your business and evolve your business, the model, so you don't evolve the model without evolving the business, I think.
That's true, and I will grant you that. The reason I didn't do that, Chris, is because what we find is that as organizations and offerings mature, there's usually a primary and a secondary and sometimes even a tertiary model. And what we wanted to do was highlight the value exchange model separately so that larger and more mature companies could in fact have things separate. I'll give you the concrete example to back that up. Stripe's, we've established that Stripe's primary value exchange model is transactions, where they make their money. But they also have a fraud detection application that lives on top of it that's time-based access and sold annually.
The value add, you know, all of the value add features that every
value add features are often sold through slightly different value exchange models. And now startups can get in trouble if they try to do that too fast. But big companies can get in trouble if they don't offer slightly different mechanisms, because part of that is how people perceive value and how they want to pay.
Yeah, I like that. I get it.
You get it? So I didn't want to call, so I want to call the union of that the business model, not just the value exchange thing there. Oh, I love these questions. But I expected as much from the ALN, because these are, y'all pretty elite people. Let me see if there's anything in the transaction.
And I guess it's also slow to evolve, because oftentimes whatever add-on or changes in pricing we want to do might include grandfathering in previous customers, and you really can just change, or you can most safely change your business model, your pricing model for the new people that you're finding, not necessarily convincing your old clients that they now have to switch. Right.
And of course, in the back of your mind, you and I both know that that, Frank, that you can't have that conversation without talking to your data architect and your systems architect and your operations team. Like, because now I've got to build in the back-end infrastructure for knowing who's got what the rights are, when do they transition, blah, blah, blah.
I mean, the biggest nightmare in one of my clients, the biggest nightmare is their internal payment system processing thing. And it may still run on Fortran, not quite sure, but they don't touch it. There's so many agreements baked into that thing that it is the most painful conversation in the company now, 20 years old.
Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah, well, good thing we have a strangler pattern to fix that. So now let's go back, and what I thought would be fun is I would take the module from we have a special workshop for startups called the Growth Pricing Workshop, and we run startups through just the monetization side. So let me go through the monetization of value exchanges in more detail, and then we'll do an activity. I promise we'll get to an activity just for fun, because I wanna show that I could do one in real time just for fun.
Because we all doubted it.
I would doubt myself, trust me. My kids do. So we got understanding value exchange models, right? And I just said that multiple types of value exchange. And what's interesting is that each value exchange model creates these unique technical requirements. So here are the 7, and we talked about time-based access. This is a slightly richer treatment because it's drawn from the book, right? If you think about time-based access, you've got perpetual, you've got annual or monthly, you can have post-use, you can have rentals, which are scheduled use, and that's becoming more common. So you're starting to see time-based access in more interesting ways. We talked about transactions, which is the defined and measurable unit of work, with Stripe as the example. But let's do a few more. A meter, I mentioned it, but it's something that is constrained and counted, or it's consumed and counted. It's constrained and counted or consumed and counted. So you can have a meter that replenishes dynamically like concurrent users, but I'm still counting them. Or I can have an absolute value. I've got 100 hours of compute time and I'm going down. I can also do named users. And some of this isn't very common in Silicon Valley lingo, but I once worked on an application where it was a stock trading derivative application, and it cost $250,000 per user. So we had very tight controls over who got to use it. Hardware, this is a very exciting one because the consumer purchases the hardware, but the hardware is slag without the software. And I think this one is really exciting and it's really growing. We're seeing it. And the challenge, of course, to product people is that the software is perceived as free. But it's not free because it's actually what's making the hardware actually work. We've got a service. This is a very precise definition, and I can happy to talk about this. When we mean service, we don't mean software as a service. We mean the software-enabled solution requires a human to be part of the equation. And an example would be Fiverr or Instacart. Another example would be, if you know, Stitch Fix, where Stitch Fix takes a bunch of parameters and a designer uses AI software to create recommendations, but they make the final choices for their customer. So it's a designed AI solution where a human is augmented. Data. I'm buying data and I'm doing interesting things with data. So you've got things like in the consumer space, Carfax. Get your Carfax report. Well, that's data. Or I'm buying a digital good in in my video game. Data is usually associated with one of some other attribute like timeliness or breadth or depth or accuracy or precision or scarcity. But there's a lot of examples where the data is the exchange of value. I'm buying the data. And of course, then you get into the world of the architecture. Well, can the architecture provide that? And what's the rights of the data of the what are the pass-through rights, if any? And then finally, we talked about performance, where the producer is compensated a percentage of the revenue gained or the cost saved. It's similar to transaction, in that the value exchange is based on a transaction, right? I had to provide something that provided performance, but it's different from transaction in that the revenue obtained is based on the outcome of what was created. And when I was writing the book, I know I'm being recorded. I went back and forth with my co-author, Jason, about whether performance is a kind of transaction or if it's separate. We felt that the back-end infrastructure for transactions and performance is sufficiently different that it motivated talking about them differently. So, and an example of performance is Vendavo. Now, before, what I would normally do is I would have you go through some examples, but what I think would be fun is, let me do this because I think it would be fun. I created a Miro board. So let's jump over to Miro. I'll show you what I did in Miro. And I thought it would be fun to look at the following. Here's my Miro board. And I did a simple table. And in this very simple table, you can see that I've got three broad consumer areas, and this is how we organize it in the book. We organize our book as B2C, B2P, and B2B. Now, there's various, like you might say, well, what about B2B to B2C or whatever? Don't worry about that. Keep it simple. B2C, B2P, B2B. And I looked at the, I created a row for time-based access, transactions, meter, hardware, service, data, and performance. So are you with me on what this table looks like? I'm going to organize us into, let's see, how many people do we have here?
20.
20. So how about 5 breakouts of 4 people? So we'll do 5 breakouts. And I'll do this kind of in real time. Just a sec.
I'm started. So if you just talk through, you want to set up your breakouts yourself?
Well, if you want to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call them team 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And all I'm going to say to the teams is, working as a team, create one example in each of these areas that I have not yet discussed. So you can't use Stripe for transaction because I've already mentioned Stripe. Are you with me?
Yep.
And I'll create, oh, geez, I didn't want to delete the whole thing. I just want to delete this one column. Okay, so what I'll do is I will create 5 teams, and
all right, and off we go.
It's asking for a